Good evening. Welcome to our free parenting workshop series sponsored by Asset School. My name is Elsa Lee, and I'm the clinical director and psychologist here at the Transforming Life Center at Asset School. Tonight, we'll begin our first workshop titled How to Help Our Child Be Their Best Selves Through Effective Communication. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you'll find this workshop helpful. There we go. All right, so how can we help our children be their best selves? There are many ways we can use, many different tactics and strategies we can use to help our children be their best selves. It really all depends on what best selves mean to you as a parent. For some parent, it might mean that, excelling in academics and being an obedient child, doing really well athletically, becoming a winning concert musician. For others, it could simply mean that you want your child to be happy and healthy, right? Or all of the above. So, I would be most happy to offer you guys all of the tricks and solutions in my pocket to fulfill all of the above if I have them. But the truth is, there's really no one way or no answer to solving all of our parenting problems or our kids' problems, so to speak, or to try to turn them into, mini us, mini adults, or whoever we aspire them to be, right? And what I do want to focus on today is something that's very practical and realistic, and something for you to take home with. And there are these top two things. Oh, there we go. So, how can we communicate with our children effectively and meaningfully? And by doing so, we want to be able to build a nurturing and supportive relationship with our children. Now, why am I choosing these two main objectives to talk about today? And other than, due to the time constraints, a big reason is because in parenting our children, we want to focus on what is modifiable and attainable. We want to be able to, do something that is tangible. And we know that a parent-child relationship has been shown to be an incredibly important protective factor in predicting long-term outcomes in children. And we're going to touch on a little bit of the research in just a second. And to understand how communication and having a strong parent-child relationship can make a big difference in our children's lives. Now, but for the time being, these would be the top two objectives that I'm going to deliver for the time that we have today. Now, before we can go on, I just want to name a couple of assumptions for you guys. These are some quick, basic assumptions that I have to mention here in order to bring us all to the same page, right? So, in order for any strategies, coping mechanisms, tactics, whatever you want to call them, in order for these to work, we need to accept the following preconceived notions. All right, that we have to believe that our child wants to do their best. We need to believe that they do want to be their best selves, right? Think about it this way. It costs our children something for them to be misbehaving or doing all the wrong, quote unquote, wrong things. Why is that? Because children do begin to understand the connection between, the cause and the effect, actions and consequences pretty early on. We're talking maybe age 4 or 5, around that time, to have a pretty solid understanding of if A happens, then B is going to be the result that I receive, right? So they do understand that if I break my daddy's favorite vase in the living room, or if I spit out the fourth spoon of pasta that my mommy had spent an hour making in the hot kitchen, something's going to happen, right? They might get punished. And punishment can come in all forms. It could be, being yelled at. It could be being reprimanded, or, some privileges could be taken away. So all kinds of punishment, they understand that cause and effect. Now, it doesn't take much for children to get the idea that, well, certain behaviors are really not very desirable, right? That's something that just teachers, peers, parents have made it really clear to them ever since they attend school, even in, JK or or even in daycare. But one would argue then that, see, if you're telling me that, my child understands cause and effect, if they understand actions and consequences, then that means that they should be able to do the right thing. I mean, wouldn't that be logic? That's the logic, right? Well, the answer is no, not really, because knowing the relationship between a behavior and a consequence doesn't immediately mean that your child knows how to do it without fail, right? So the difference here is knowing something versus understanding how to do something. Now, knowing what is desirable to them is not the same thing as knowing how they can achieve that, right? It's not as simple as just telling them, just do it. You know better than this, don't you? You know not to spit your pasta out, or you know not to sweep everything off the table. You know better than this, right? I mean, these are things that we often say to our kids as if they really know what we're talking about. You know, again, just because they know the relationship between the cause and the effect does not automatically mean that they know how to get there, right? So, holding on to that belief that if they could do well, they would have done it. And as a parent, we need to trust that, just like us adults, our kids do want to behave, just like we all want to be a good parent, right? That's why you're here today. If you know how to be a good parent, you would absolutely do it. And so, children all want to be loved, praised, complimented on. There's a child psychologist, Ross Green. You guys might have heard of his works. He's written this book, actually a couple of books. And in this one parenting book, he has mentioned that, kids do well when they can. That's kind of the phrase that he has popularized. Kids do well when they can. And it's true, right? The logic is that if they can do well, they would. But why can't they? And the answer is they need our help. And they would have done a lot of things that can earn them positive feedback if they're in full control of their behaviors, right? And assuming that our children do want to do their best is a pretty critical first step, because if we constantly and consistently question their intentions, their motives, we would be losing a lot of precious opportunities, on teaching them, moments of possible connections that we can have with them, supporting them with actual effective ways in learning how to not spit out their pasta or not to knock down their dad's, favorite vase. And our kids have way less lived experiences, compared to us adults. If you think about that, for most of us here, probably we've lived 30 years of our lives, 40, 50 years of our lives, more than them. And so it's quite unfair for us to look at them like they're a mini adult, and that we just say to ourselves, well, Johnny isn't listening because he chooses not to. How about we say Johnny has trouble listening, and he has trouble doing what is best for him because he may not know how, he may not know the steps. Or is there something that's stopping him from doing that, right? So that's the number one assumption. I know that's a mouthful, but that's a very, very important assumption. The other assumption is that we want to challenge the idea that a child is a problem. We want to tell ourselves that our child is not a problem that needs to be fixed, right? We want to see our kids as a full human being, just like us. They have thoughts, they have preferences. Just like you and I, we have needs and wants, and our kids do have needs and wants, likes and dislikes, just like us. And for instance, think about this: when my spouse, comes charging at me and says, "Hey, why don't you change the last toilet paper? Why don't you change your toilet paper roll? It just ran out. You saw that it's empty. Or why are you making hamburgers for dinner when you know that I'm on a diet?" How would that sound if your spouse looks at you like you're the problem, you go fix it? That you need to resolve this because you're not doing what he thinks is best, right? Maybe you as an adult, you can use a reminder, you can use some encouragement to be able to do the next right thing, which is to replace the toilet paper roll, or to not cook red meat when your husband is on diet, when your wife is on diet. Maybe you can create a couple more alternative dishes. So, of course, a lot of the problems that we deal with in parenting are a lot more challenging and a lot more complex than, choosing what to eat or just following basic house rules. We acknowledge that. While our kids may be acting in ways that are difficult and challenging, they may not be aligning with our expectations, we don't want to see them as a problem like waiting to be repaired, a problem waiting to be fixed. We want to acknowledge children as individual living human beings, for who they are, that they have strengths and weaknesses. They have their individual identities. They have their likes, preferences, dislikes, just like us, right? So they're not broken individuals that are waiting to be fixed or amended so that they become our ideal, perfect, well-behaved child of their parents, right? So again, it's easier said than done, but let's just to hold on to that assumption. They're not a problem that needs to be fixed. And then the third assumption here is that we need to collaborate and have partnership with our kids. Now, needless to say, for any relationship to work, it requires more than one person, right? You can't have a healthy, fulfilling relationship when there's only one party calling all the shots. It can't just be one person deciding on everything. Unless you're dealing with a robot, or better yet, like, the artificial intelligence, the AI now, we need to assume that in order to help foster this relationship, this nurturing relationship with our kids, and to help them develop their best selves, we have to work together with them. Now, with these three basic assumptions in mind, maybe for some, this is a mindset shift, maybe it's a paradigm shift, but we're going to challenge that. All right, we're going to challenge some of our assumptions, our myths, things that we've held on to. If we're willing to take that first step as a parent, we're going to be dealing with less battles. We're going to be less confronted by our kids all the time. It'd be easier for us parents to mobilize, just to get ourselves in action, to do something on our end to build up our children. Now, what is communication? After all, this is about communication. What do we want to communicate, really? Now, most of us might assume that we know how to communicate, right? If you know how to talk, then you got to know how to communicate. That's a given. As parents, we communicate with our kids every day, all the time, numerous times, from the moment that they wake up and getting them out of bed in the morning, asking them, hey, what do you want for breakfast? Prepping them and reminding them to pick up their lunch, get to school on time. They come home, we ask them, hey, how's your day? What happened during recess, et cetera, et cetera. So we're definitely really busy and talking, saying things, asking tons and tons of questions. But, just because we're asking them questions, doing all these things, reminding them, saying things at them, to them, doesn't mean that we're actually communicating. Now, check out this illustration here. It's a pretty fun one. The mother on my right, I guess, is it on your right? Yeah, it's on your right too. So the mother on my right of the screen, she's busily talking to her son, and she goes, oh, you left your shoes in the doorway again. How many times do I have to tell you that I don't like tripping over them, right? The shoes belong in the closet, blah, blah, blah. So on and on she goes, right? Meanwhile, the son to the left, he thinks to himself, blah, 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 blah. And what does that mean? So while the mother might assume that she's communicating with her son, she's talking a lot, right? She's reprimanding, lecturing, informing how the son should behave. That's not really communication. Why? Because clearly the son is not receiving what she delivers, right? What communication really means isn't just talking. It's a bidirectional relationship. It's a two-way street. It's a two-way situation that happens between people. Right. So there has to be an ongoing exchange, and it's definitely not a one-sided event. Now, let's say if I ask my kid one night, hey, what do you want for dinner? And then she says, can we have pizza? Fair enough. Well, and then I thought, well, you know what? No, actually, pizza is not healthy. Right. And then she says, how about cheeseburgers? And then I say, no, that's unhealthy too. And then I go, hey, you know what? Don't worry about it. I know what we should get. We're going to have a simple salad and soup and maybe a sandwich. Done. Easy. Now, is that communication? If you ask me, the parent, I might say, oh yeah, I asked her what she wants. If you ask my kid, she's going to say, no. But why? While me and my kid are seemingly talking to each other, I wasn't really trying to receive what she is trying to tell me. I mean, I can argue and just say, well, I did hear her. She did say she wants pizza, she wants burger, but I mean, that's unhealthy. Of course, I'm not going to let her have those. That's all true. But remember, from the perspective of communication, which is what we're talking about today, do I know why my kid wants pizza or burger for dinner tonight? Is this something that she's been craving for a while now? Did I bother explaining to her why we may not want to have pizza and burger tonight? Or maybe there is a healthier alternative that might be appealing to her and to me too, right? So in parenting and working with kids, that's not the kind of communication that will help our children. Why? Because even though I asked her a question, I wasn't really trying to get her input. I wasn't really listening. I was more focused on that preconceived response in my mind. And, true communication is more than just exchanging information. It's more than just a back and forth. There also should be collaboration. There has to be some understanding between the two parties. Like I said before, it's not a one-way street, right? It's something that requires not just talking or asking questions, but also listening, acknowledging, understanding, and reflecting back to the other person that we understand what they're saying. All right. So we're going to talk about all the skills and strategies that you can use to help your kid receive your message and for you to receive their message. Now, after all, I've got to throw some research stuff at you guys because, it's not coming from me. We know communication is important, right? But why is it really important? It isn't just about getting them to listen to us. And, interestingly, when I was going through the sign up sheet, right? And we were asking all the parents to fill out the form. Also, most importantly, really for me, is to know what questions do you guys have. And interestingly, everyone filled out pretty much the same things and in different ways. Of course, they're phrased in different ways, but everyone knows the importance of communication. Everyone wants to help their child listen better, right? So that they can get them to do things their way, right? That's a gist that I got from, over 200 something responses. And, it's my job to explain to you, why is this even important? It's not for me, some from research. Now, I don't have time to go over all the hundreds and actually more than thousands of research that looks at that the studies that have looked at parent-child communication, connection, relationship. There's just plenty out there. If you go onto Google Scholar, you type in parent-child relationship connection, you're going to see tons and tons of evidence for this, right? But I selected 2 of these research articles or studies rather, that I think are very indicative, or they highlight what we're going to talk about today. And I just want to really throw this at you. So in the first study here that I'm citing, the researchers followed over, I want to say 15,000 students, teens, over a period of 15 years. So it's what we call a longitudinal study. So it's not a one and done deal. It's a kind of study that allow researchers to follow the same group of kids or people or adults over a long period of time. So in this study, they follow this group of kids over 15 years, right? So that's not an easy feat. It requires a lot of intensive resources and whatnot. So now, this group of preteens and teens, they range from ages 12 to 17, and they were asked to communicate. They weren't asked to communicate. I'm sorry, they were asked to rate a couple of things about their relationship with their parents, such as how much they felt warmth from their parents, how they felt like their communication with their parents were effective, how much time did they spend with their parents, and also the academic expectations that were coming from their parents, right? So these were the couple of not outcome, but these are a couple of the variables and the measures that they use in looking at the relationship piece. All right. And about 15 years later, the same group of kids, now in their 20s and 30s, or maybe mid 30s, maybe, they're being asked again, they were being interviewed again. And this time around, they were being asked questions on how they're doing in life. What's your level of stress? Their levels of depression, optimism, substance use, smoking habits, things like that. So a bunch of health-related measures. And so what the study found was that the adolescents who reported having warm, loving, close, caring relationships with their parents, those who spend more time with their parents, those who have higher levels of satisfaction and positive communication with their parents, they generally reported having higher levels of health, right? They feel more optimistic. They have higher level of higher quality romantic relationships with their partners in their young adulthood and adulthood, lower levels of depression, lower levels of anxiety, stress, and so also substance use, right? So that's a pretty significant finding. And this is not the only study. We're looking at multiple or more than multiple longitudinal studies that have examined similar variables. There's another study Similar effects followed about 4,000 students in a school setting. And they asked the kids, hey, how do you perceive your relationship with your parents to be, mainly in the context of communication and care? So the kids were basically asked, do you feel like your communication with your parents are effective? Do you feel being cared for? Do you feel being loved? And those who have higher levels of communication and feel more loved, perceived love, rated lower on depression, rated lower on higher on self-esteem, lower lower body image problems. So that's definitely good. So what these results are telling us is that by having these positive and close communication styles with our parents, with their parents, and also receiving them is really critical. And these things are associated with better outcomes when they get older. And I remember, this is all perceived by the child. This is not coming from the perspective of parents. And what that means is it depends on how the child receives your care and love. It depends on how the child believes that they're communicating with you, right? So it is the child's perception, which is why it's so important that they need to receive what you're trying to give them. All that love and affection, all that sacrifice that you make, they have to be received. And if the child doesn't receive it, the child doesn't feel it, it goes down the drain. It goes to waste. And what a pity is that? Now, the truth is, communication is no easy feat. We know it requires a lot of work. It's definitely very intentional. That's why you guys are all here. In my 15 plus years of clinical work, there's one recurring theme here that I can share with you that comes up over and over and over again with my clients. And we're talking clients from ages 5 and above. So I see all kinds of clients from all backgrounds, walks of life. No, I don't just work with children, I work with adults and families and older adults as well. So one thing that many clients struggle with over their lifetime is that somehow there's always some type of issue with their relationship with their family of origin, mostly with their parents. Now, this does not mean that, every person, every child has gone through some kind of serious abuse. It's not about, that's nothing serious like that. All we're just talking about is the idea that, they struggle with their relationship with their parents. I often hear my clients talk about, just feeling like they don't have the support from their parents. They don't feel understood as a child. They don't feel accepted. And interestingly, some would even say that, I know it in my head that my mom loves me. I know it for a fact that my father cares about me, then what's the problem? I don't feel it. I don't feel it. That's what they would always say. I know they love me, but I just don't feel it. Right. So then it would be logical for me to ask a follow-up question. Then what do they have to do? What should your parents have done in order for you to feel loved, to feel cared for? And they'll say, I just want them to listen to me. I want them to be okay with who I am. I want them to really know me and know how I feel. Now, I think it's very heart-wrenching for me to hear, because as a parent, I trust that we all want our kids to be loved, right? We all care and deeply love our children. There's no question about that. But what is sad, what's disheartening is that our children may not always experience the kind of nurture that we think we're offering. And so, we think what is best as parents. And, after all, like I said, we've all lived longer, we've got more experiences. And surely enough, it's fair to say that we do have more knowledge than our kids. And one way for us to show that we really care about them is not to immediately tell them what we think is right and how they should live their lives and what they need to do, but rather to understand why they think or feel in a certain way. And when we as the parents communicate with only one goal in mind, which is to correct their behaviors, to change their way of doing things and thinking about things, our kids are quite unlikely to come to us for support. If we're always out for correcting them and telling them what they did wrong and how they can improve their behaviors, they're unlikely to want to come to us for support. They communicate with us with their struggles, and sometimes parents and parents of teenagers would come and say, why does my child just never want to talk to me? Why do they always give me a one-word answer? And we go into deeper understanding of relationships with their children, and it turns out that there's really never been a strong, close connectedness there to begin with. And so 10 years later, 5 years later, they're now teenagers. They don't feel like there's a relationship there to begin with. So they go, why should I come talk to you? I've got friends. I can go to my friends. I don't have to come to you. Right. So we want to be proactive in building this relationship. And one way in doing so is to go by learning how to communicate effectively. Now, think about this really quick scenario. And I'm going to use this to illustrate a very quick point, right? And then I'm going to move on. Now, think about, let's say one day you come home from work, you feel all angry and stressed, your boss gave you a really hard time, said something really unfair to you, kind of claimed all the credit that you've put in for a project that you've been working on for weeks. And then you came home, you went up to your spouse and you go, oh, gee, it's a tough day. I can't believe that my boss is so unfair and my boss is so dishonest. And then your spouse turns around and said to you, gee, I told you a long time ago you should have quit. I told you that your boss is dishonest and he's just a bad guy. You won't listen. You really got to speak to the higher ups and just tell them, you're going to quit. If they don't fix your evaluation, if they don't fix this problem, you know what? There's no point in staying here because you're never going to get promoted. Hey, why don't you just start talking to maybe a headhunter and see if you can find another job? And then on and on he goes or she goes. How might you feel? I wouldn't feel great about that. Because all the spouse did was what? Giving you unsolicited advice, telling you that you did everything wrong. You could have listened to him or her, that you should get your act together, and telling you basically how to change. Now, in that moment, perhaps all you want is just for them to listen to you. What happened? Share your discontent, to share your disappointment, your anger. But in their response, you felt none of that. You probably felt unheard, right? Is your spouse wrong in any of this? No. Everything they say is right. You probably could have quit. You probably should have done something different. But in that moment, you guys weren't communicating, right? Because there's no true listening of your story. There's no attempt in trying to feel what you went through. There's no attempt in knowing what your thoughts were in the situation. Can you say they don't love you or he or she doesn't love you? No, not really. Right? He or she clearly cares about you, and that's why they became so intense. But then you walk away feeling even more frustrated, right? So the same goes for our children. And when we try to get our children to listen to us because we want to correct them, we think we have all the answers. We think we know better. We can give them all the guidance and instructions. Why? Because we want to protect them. That's not going to work. Why? Because even though they're all done out of good intentions, the purpose of communicating with our kids is not just to tell them how to live, how to be a better person, how to do all the right things, give them all suggestions and advice. The true purpose is to have them feel loved, to feel supported, to feel accepted, to feel nurtured. Why? I don't have to go back to the research to convince you. Because the research findings, again, briefly put it, they show that if you want your child to be happy, well-developed, and well-rounded, they need to first understand that and receive that their parents love them, care for them, they have warmth, they have the support, the nurturance. All right, so this begs the question, how can I partner with my child? How can I communicate with them better so that they can feel understood, they can feel loved, and that we're in a partnership? Now, here we have listen, right? You might go, oh boy, no, I know this. I know I have to listen. I listen all day long. All right. Well, believe it or not, the first step is indeed to listen. It's not how to say the right things. It's not how to get your points across. All right. I hope at this point you get my point. You've been listening, hopefully. Now, many people think that communication is all about giving the right response, right? Saying the right things. But before we learn how to respond, we really need to know how to listen. You might say, we've got 2 ears, we just sit there and listen. No, that's not how we listen. Listening requires intention and activity. But why is it important? First of all, let's see. Because if we listen, we are creating room and space for our kids to really open up and share their thoughts and feelings. We're actually visualize that there is a room. You're opening the door by listening and welcoming them in. Oh, come on in, Johnny. Talk to me. You're opening the door to welcome their thoughts and feelings, right? You're creating room and space. You're showing them that you're willing to spend time on them. You're willing to take time to listen and fully enter into their world. You could, through listening, you're showing them that, Johnny, your thoughts and experiences and feelings, they're really important and worthy. I'm willing to put down whatever I'm doing to listen to you. Now, how do we do it? Probably easier said than done. We focus on our child. How do we remain fully focused on the child? What's the best enemy here? The strongest enemy? Probably our phones, or iPads, computers, anything that distracts us from listening to our kid when they're talking. No distractions, no scrolling phones whatsoever when you're listening. Um, you tell yourself that I want to give them 100% attention to what they're going to tell me, especially if they come up to you, right? If they come up to you after school, they go, "Hey, mom, well, okay, never mind." Then you know that they're up for something. Put down whatever you're doing and go like, "Okay, what is it? What is it?" Sit there, be welcoming, give them space to listen, give them space to talk so you can listen to them. Hold off on advice giving. This is a hard one for myself as well. We hold off on giving opinions, advice, suggestions, even if we think that we have the solution to all their problems. Now, remember, kids come to us not necessarily for advice or suggestions. They may not even need advice, to be honest. Most kids are pretty smart these days. Um, Likely they figured out what they could have done if they knew, what the issues are. Sometimes they do need support and advice, right? That's a different story. But a lot of times when they do come to us, they want to be listened to. They want you to ask them what is happening. Give them a pair of listening ears. Reflect on what you hear. Now, think of yourself as a mirror, right? Pretend that you're holding up a mirror and that you're trying to help your child see themselves by using your words. Um, I'll give you some examples on how to use these what we call reflective statements. Now, just quickly, let's take a look at this example. Now, Anna's a child and mom is mom. Let's see if this works. All right, so I hope you guys can listen to the recording. I can't tell if you guys can listen to it, but if you can listen to the recording, here's a script for you. These are just, scripts that I've put together for, just countless conversations that I've had listening to children and their parents talking in my sessions and family sessions and counseling. So here, Anna, the child, she's having a conversation with mom. She's debating, hey, should I go for the swim team tryout? She sounds quite bothered by it. You're right. And then she started by sharing with her mother what's upsetting to her. I'm worried that I'm not going to make it. So her mom responded, and she asked, oh, why not? You won't know until you try. So mom here, she jumps in and she said, well, you never know until you try. And that's something that perhaps all of us are so used to saying. This is an example of advice giving. So basically, mom is saying, well, why don't you try first? Go for it. Just try. You don't know, right? And there's really nothing wrong with asking Anna to try. But remember, Anna may not be seeking advice right here because all she said so far was she just didn't want to go. She didn't want to try. I mean, what else do we know? She looks upset, and that's all we know, right? But when we jump to advice giving, it may show the child that we're trying to solve their problems. We're really quick to tell them what to do instead of really wanting to listen to the full story and to understand what they're trying to tell us. Now, see how Anna responds to another round of advice giving. So the mom approaches again with what seems to be an encouragement and a comforting statement. She goes, oh, it's okay, honey. You should still try and see what happens. Even if you don't make it, it's no big deal. I think you're a great swimmer. You've been practicing. I think you can do it. You got this. Give it a shot. See what happens. Right. I mean, I think nobody's going to disagree that, with me that, hey, this mom tries to be encouraging. She tries to be very positive sounding. It's all true, right? She tries to be encouraging. She tries to be supportive and saying all the positive things that the child can do. But the problem is, does the mom really know what Anna is thinking, what Anna is going through? Has the mom connected with her yet and really understanding why she thinks she's not good enough? Right? That she seems upset. She seems worried. She seems afraid. There's something that's bothering her. So, in this just very brief, quick script, this child is likely going to walk away feeling just as worried about the situation because her thoughts, feelings remain untouched and they remain unheard. And maybe all that this child, Anna, wants is just for her parent to listen to her struggles. What are the challenges? understand why she's worried so that she herself can figure out a solution that makes the most sense to her. Now, I should say same scenario, but a different outcome. I'm not going to play the recording because I'm not sure if you guys can hear it. So you guys can just quickly read it. I read it. Swim team is tryout is coming up. Don't feel like going. Why not? I don't know. I'm just worried that I can't make it. What makes you so worried? I don't know. I think I'm always last during practice. Mom says, I can see why. It's not a good feeling to come last. Anna says, well, it's not like I'm always last. Oh, so there are times that you did okay? Well, I guess. So maybe there is a chance that you may not come last at this tryout? Well, that's true. That's true. Well, how do you feel about giving it a try? Well, I'm still not sure, but maybe it won't be that bad. Now, in this conversation, I hope you guys see some differences here. Same scenario, same struggle, same swim team tryout, but the mom here, what she's doing is, she does more of the listening to what the child is telling her. How so? The mother uses what the child tells her. The child just says, I'm worried. I'm just worried that I can't make it. The mom catches on to the worry, right? And the mom says, oh, what makes you so worried? She's asking, she's listening, right? She catches on to the worry and asks her more about the worry. So the child responds, well, I don't know. Sometimes they really don't know. They can't tell you. But she did come up with something. And Anna says, well, I think I'm always last during practice. Now, instead of jumping to the conclusion and say, well, but maybe you won't be last this time. Well, just practice more. You can do it. Instead, mom continues to listen. And she uses what we call a reflective statement, a reflecting skill. So mom says, okay, Anna, I can see why. I can see why now. Well, it's not a good feeling to come last, right? Mom is not adding anything. She's not assuming. She's not problem solving. All she's doing right here is she's reflecting. Yeah, it's not a good feeling to come last. See that empathy? Well, guess what? Anna says, it's not like I'm always last. So she proceeds with correcting her mom. Well, mom, no, I'm not always last. And then the mom goes, right? She continues to catch on to what Anna said. Oh, so you're not always last. So there are times that you actually did okay, right? Again, she's simply reflecting, holding up a mirror of what she hears. And Anna says, well, I guess, see, there's already, just by way of a couple of sentences here, the child already changes her response and how she feels about this. Now the child is questioning, wait a second, I'm not always last. There are times that I did okay. Now, mom said, so maybe there's a chance that you may not come last at this tryout too. No advice giving, again, simply reflecting. Now, Anna says, well, that's true. There's maybe a chance that I may not come last, right? Remember, mom is still not giving anything that Anna does not already know. So then here it goes. Mom says, how do you feel about giving it a try? Right? So it's an fully open-ended question. How do you feel about giving it a try? Instead of, why don't you give it a try? It's the same idea. Why don't you give it a try? How do you feel about giving it a try? What's the difference? One is way more open-ended. Open-ended means I'm welcoming you for feedback. How do you feel about giving it a try? So Anna, she gives room for Anna to answer, well, I'm not sure, but maybe it won't be that bad, right? So while this is a made-up script, I'll tell you this is coming from a lot of just very similar back and forth conversations coming from real cases. All right, now just very quickly going back to the reflecting skills, giving you a couple of quick ideas how to reflect. Reflecting skills are harder than they seem, but they're not really that hard to learn. Once you grasp the idea behind it, it's actually quite easy to navigate and to manage. Three kinds, just very simply, of reflecting skills. Sometimes you want to reflect on the content. So the content would be basically what you hear. You can reflect on their feelings. You can reflect on the meaning behind what they're saying. So reflecting on the content, wow, this seems like a tough situation. This seems like it's like a tough time for you to decide if you want to go to the swim team tryout or not. Reflecting on the content. Anna, you seem really upset about this. Reflecting on the feelings, right? And then the meaning behind this. Well, I know you really want to go to the tryout. It sounds like you're really debating about going to the tryout, but you're also worried what would happen if you can't make it, right? So this is a little bit of a step up, and it requires close listening and kind of reading between the lines, if you will. Now, asking questions, how do we ask questions so that we can solicit more information? Two ways of asking questions. One is called open-ended, the other is called close-ended. Why did I put open-ended on both? I don't know. Sorry about that. One should say open-ended, the other one should say close-ended. All right, I'm going to fix this later. So open-ended questions are those that would provide our kids with more space to answer. Usually starts with like a question prompt, something like, how's school today? How are you doing? How are you feeling? What is your favorite part of the day? How do you feel about going to Johnny's birthday party, right? You can invite a lot more stuff, a lot more content that is beyond what a closed-ended question would solicit, which is a yes or a no. Closed-ended questions are often used when we just want quick, simple information. Oh, did you speak to the teacher about your grade? What flavor of ice cream do you want? Where are you going to meet your friends tonight? Did you study for your tests? Do you know why they did this? Or do you remember what the teacher said to you? So these are close-ended questions. Now, there are pros and cons to each, and we like to use both in our communication with our kids. So when we do open-ended questions, like I said, it gives us more room to ask for more information. The child can share more, or as much or as little as they want. It gives the child more room and opportunity to think deeply about their answer, their questions. Close-ended, it's faster, it's quick, but it doesn't give you much to work with. All right, so there's no one way in asking questions, but usually we tell parents that if you really want to try to understand the situation, really want to get to know the full picture and really want to get more information about their feeling, about their thoughts, you want to rely more on open-ended questions. But if you're kind of stuck with someone, a child who doesn't open up easily, you can turn to close-ended questions first and solicit a little bit more concrete information, and then you can move on with asking questions in different ways. All right, so just very quickly, this is a list of possible things that you can say to your kids. A lot of them seem very basic, and communicating questions, ideas with our children, they don't have to be complicated. You don't have to have a graduate degree in psychology or in teaching or in special education in order to know how to talk to your children. Really, all you need is just a couple of go-tos, right? I want to reflect on them. I want to be open in asking them, how are you feeling? What is going on? What made you angry? What's on your mind? What do you think is going to happen? What made you not want to go to school? What ideas do you have, right? So the list can go on and on and on. I can, come up with 100 different ways in asking the same thing. And, the more you allow yourself to practice asking these questions and even spending the time to invite information from your child, the easier this is going to be. But just for the sake of time, this is all that I'm going to show. But if anyone's interested, feel free to come to me. I can give you more ideas. All right. Now, so the other thing that I want to quickly talk about pertains to questions that a lot of parents have asked when they signed up for this workshop, which is, how do I get my kids to calm down? How do I get my kids to not throw a fit all the time? Basically, how do I deal with difficult emotions? Now, we need to know, first of all, our own emotions and our own triggers before we can help our children deal with their emotions. You may have heard this, right? You got to be aware of your own reactions and your own triggers and your hot buttons before you can help them. Why is that? So when we understand our own emotions and our own triggers, we can monitor what is going on in our head. Our kids are always observing, they're always modeling after what we do. So let's say you come home from a long day of work, right? You're tired, you're stressed out, you're frustrated at something that went wrong at work, and you're likely to, come home with just way more negative emotions than if you had a good day at work. That can result in a lower threshold for, say, your child being non-compliant. Your emotional tank, we like to call it an emotional tank. Your emotional tank can be low. So, when your own emotional tank resources are so low, it takes a lot less to get triggered and respond in a non-constructive way, which is the last thing we want, right? Especially when our kids are doing things that we don't like. And then we get set off. And when we get set off, we've all been there, we get escalated. our emotions become dysregulated, we escalate the situation, we get into this power struggle, and then the fight just, it explodes right there. Nobody wins. Um, we want to, I can't highlight this and emphasize this enough, right? It feels like, oh, it's a given. I'm an adult, I'm in full control. But I'll tell you, whenever I observe, the parent-child interaction in my sessions, in this family treatment room, you just see the triggers being, it could be an easy trigger coming from the child, like, no, that's not it. Or I just don't want to go to school. I don't want to do this work, or I don't want to listen to you. And the parent on the other side of the room, they just goes like, boom. And then you see that in their eyes. Wow, it really takes very little to set them off. And sometimes parents themselves don't know. And it's understandable, right? It's stressful. It's not always easy to be a parent. So we want to get used to the habit of asking ourselves, how am I feeling? What is going on in my mind? Am I feeling okay? Am I feeling positive? It's not selfish to ask ourselves these questions. Why? Because when we have the calm and composure, it's going to be so much easier to manage our own children's negative or difficult emotions. We need to be comfortable with our own emotions, and they can be positive or negative. They don't always have to be negative, because if we're comfortable with our own emotions, it's going to help our children accept their own emotions and work with them. Unless we're comfortable with them, unless we're at ease with our own feelings, it's just going to be hard for them to connect with their own feelings. Now, give you a quick example. This is a family that I used to work with. Child was brought to me because of anxiety, a lot of nervousness, functioning, but not to their full capacity. This mother clearly cares deeply for her child. This child, comes to sessions every week. The mother comes every week, sometimes with family meetings. So, clearly very involved, very engaged mother. But in the sessions, every time this child, when this child tries to say something to me to answer my questions, like, what makes you anxious? What's going on in school? And whenever the child said something to the effect of, I'm just worried that, and then the mother cuts him off. And the mother just goes, oh no, honey, you're fine, it's okay, it's not that bad, you don't have to worry about this, you don't have to feel scared. And you can see the child immediately just shuts down and the child withdraws. Why is that? It's not because the mother doesn't want to understand the child, but the mother herself has a lot of difficulty sitting with her own anxiety. So whenever the child brings up the slightest sense of anxiety, the mother reacts, right? So the mother has so much discomfort with the idea of anxiety that she can't even allow her child to be anxious. And you know what? If your child is not allowed to feel and be okay with their own emotions, it's not going to have their anxiety disappear. It's only going to get bottled up. So the idea that I'm trying to illustrate here is that, knowing our own emotions and being aware and mindful of them, being comfortable with them, is an important first step before we even want to learn how to help our children express and connect with their own emotions. Now, here's a 4-step emotional walkthrough that I want to quickly go over. Acronym, I love acronyms. It's an easy one, goes with the 4 first letters of the words: ask, acknowledge, connect, and empathize. So we'll call it ACE just for simplicity's sake. Ask, right? First step, ask what happens. What's going on? Listen to what the child has to say to you. What is going on? What happened? Tell me more, right? Let the child tell you what is the issue first, even when you think you know what's going on with them. Little Johnny gets angry and, he's playing with Legos and he just sweeps them on the floor because he was just not able to build the kind of tower that he wants. Sweeps across the room, starts crying. Let's say this is an 8-year-old Johnny or 7-year-old Johnny, maybe a little younger. Don't assume that, oh boy, here he comes again. Here, another temper tantrum. It's tempting, isn't it? You see what's happening. You think you know what it is. Remember, no assumptions. You go up there, ask Johnny, what's going on? Even if you see what he's doing, you ask, Johnny, what's happening? By doing that, you are actually giving the child not just a chance to talk about what is going on, but also give them the room to hear their own feedback. Oh, I'm trying to figure out what is happening here, right? You give them a chance to gain clarity. Acknowledge is the second step. Acknowledge the situation. You want to try to describe what is happening. You want to reflect on what's happening. say if Johnny starts getting angry because, again, he has trouble building the Legos and in the way that he wants, the tower just won't stand. You can acknowledge the situation just by describing what you see. You go, well, Johnny, it looks like you're having such a hard time with the Legos. It just looks like the tower won't stay. Oh, man, this is hard, right? Sometimes just right after you've acknowledged this challenge, you find that you don't even have to deal with the next two steps. And the child just goes, oh, yes, I can't do it. I can't do it. And then you know what? And then you just jump right in. Oh, okay, yes, this is frustrating. This is hard. All right, let's see what we can do together to, for this to work. Right there, you dissolve this crisis and it doesn't have to be escalated. Now, let's say the child has even more emotional needs than simply like little happy Johnny, and now he's all good again because mommy's stepping in to help him build the tower. Johnny is very frustrated, right? Temper tantrums, screaming, tossing himself across, the room. You want to connect with his feelings. Now, the child psychiatrist, I think he's pretty known, and he wrote this book called The Whole Brain Child. Maybe many of you have read it. Dan Siegel. So he has this saying that goes, if you can name it, you can tame it. Right? It's a very popularized saying. The it here stands for emotions. If you can name the emotion, you can tame the emotion. Simply giving your child the room to name what they're going through, sometimes that's all they need. Half the battle is conquered. You don't even have to go through the difficult steps. You don't even have to let them escalate, because there's nothing to escalate. Why? They've now have they have now gained the ability to say, Mom, I'm so mad. I'm so frustrated. How do we get them to talk about their feelings? You connect with them on that emotional level. How do you feel? What is it like when you keep trying and the tower just won't stay, right? Or what is it like when your friend didn't want you to sit with her during lunch? Oh man, that sucks. That's not a good feeling. And sometimes really young children may not have the language to describe all their emotions. So you want to help them. Oh boy, you seem so angry when your sister just took away your toy like that, right? Was it frustrating? Was it, I might be angry too when that happens. Or you just look really, really annoyed. You look so frustrated when that tower keeps falling. Um, you know, some parents would jump in often here at this point and say, well, but I don't really know what's going on with them. I mean, I don't know. They won't tell me. I keep asking what's going on. They will just keep throwing their Legos across the room. Well, then you step in even more. You can take a guess, and it's okay if you're wrong. It's okay if you don't quite grasp the feeling that they're really going through. Why? Because they will always correct you. If they're not angry, they'll tell you, no, I'm not angry. Well, okay, then what is it? Are you sad? Are you frustrated? I mean, you got to have one of those right. At one point, you're going to get it. And once your child understands that you understand them, that's just like that light bulb moment, like the light bulb just goes off, and you will be able to see that look on their face. It's like, oh, yes, they get it. They know how frustrating this is. This is not an exaggeration or overstatement. And I've done this time and time and time again in counseling sessions and therapy sessions. And sometimes that is all that the child needs. You don't have to have all the right language to say all the right things and the smart words and the words of wisdom. No, all you need is just to sit with them, ask, acknowledge, and connect with their feelings. Sometimes you can even observe that they're nonverbal. Let's say the child just keeps saying no to everything that you're trying with, giving them the words for emotions. You can observe what they see, what you see. Let's say they're frowning, they're scrunched up, their face is all scrunched up, they're holding onto their fist tightly. Observe that and then just name it. Gee, you've been frowning ever since you came back from your cousin's birthday party. What's going on? I don't know. Well, you don't frown all the time, Johnny. This is the first time I see you frown so much. Something must be going on. There you have it, right? Take some patience, take some trial and error, a lot of patience, I should say, a lot of trial and error, but that's okay, right? You're not trying to be a perfect parent. You're not trying to be the therapist here, but you're trying to be a parent who cares enough to want to communicate and to listen and to be present while they struggle through their emotions. And the last step is just to empathize. Easier said than done, yes, but it's really not that hard. How do you empathize? It must be hard for you to not have someone to sit with during lunch. It must be hard for you to not be invited to that play date. I can see how disappointing it is. If I were you, I would feel the same way. Simple, empathic statement. That's all you really need. I know you really want to play on the iPad and you don't want to do your homework, right? Hey, that's really empathic. Your kid might even look at you like, wait, what? What did you just say? Why are you not screaming at me for wanting to stay on my iPad and not do my homework? What did mom just say? Wait, something's different. Yeah, something is different. Why? When you show empathy, you're connecting with the kids, right? There is a fundamental need, not just within our kids, but for everyone. We all need to have we all want to be empathized. Let's put it that way. We all want our feelings to be heard and accepted. Now, again, at this point, usually when I'm doing this in person, parents would raise their hands and say, well, but that means I'm giving in. If my kid's not doing their homework, how can I empathize with that? Well, then I'd say, well, you're probably getting empathy wrong. Showing empathy or being empathic, it doesn't mean that you're agreeing to a negative behavior. You're not saying yes to something bad. You're not reinforcing anything bad. It simply means that you're willing to enter the child's world and be in their shoes. That's it. You're willing to see it through their lenses and relate to them why they might be reacting in a certain way. That's all you're doing. All right. So when you do this and when you're willing to sit with their emotions and be empathic with them, what you're really doing is to create a safe and emotional space for your child to let you know how they feel, right? And after this is accomplished, then your child will have a lot more cognitive and mental space to work on a solution with you. And then you can talk about problem solving, and then you can tell them what is the right thing to do, what would be the next best step. Now, just a couple of quick do's when communicating. You may have already heard of some of these strategies. Speak to our kids at the same eye level. I mean, this is kind of like a given, but just to highlight that, especially for younger kids, always maintain the same eye level. Because when you bring yourself to your kids' level, you make them feel safer, they're more in control, they feel like you're willing to come down to their level, even if it means squatting, you're bringing yourself down closer to the ground. I can tell you how powerful that just tiny gesture would be. Try it if you haven't. Giving our kids options, right? Especially when we want them to do something that they don't prefer. It can give them a sense of control of the situation, not the solution, but more of the situation. So there's less tendency for them to just immediately defy and say, no, 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 no. Let's say your kid has trouble doing his homework, after he comes home from school, right? Give them an option. Do you want to do your homework now and then go to the playground before dinner? Or do you want to do your homework later after dinner, but hey, that means we don't have time to go to the playground? What would you prefer? And you're truly letting them choose, Sometimes it might take a bit of compromising on your end. You may not win every battle, and that's okay. Pick your battles, give them options. It's not a power struggle, and it shouldn't be a power struggle, right? Remember, we're not trying to control the child. We're trying to control the situation, and we want to share the sense of control so that your child feels that this is a collaborative relationship, this is a partnership. And when you give them options, you're allowing them to take control of some of the situation, right? It's an inborn need, it's an innate need to want to be in control of our situation. So giving them control doesn't mean that you're giving in. It doesn't mean that you're yielding and budging to everything that they ask for, but it just means that I'm willing to work with you to come up with an alternative. Because honestly, if you strong arm them into doing something, when they're younger, it might work, and then when your kid gets older, becomes a teenager, they're stronger than you, they're bigger than you, they really don't care, I'm not going to come home for dinner. I don't, what's the big deal? Well, then don't give me food. It's fine. I'm going to hang out with my friends. Right. So you don't want to keep removing privileges. You don't want to keep punishing, but you want to offer them some sense of control by giving them options. And that's one way of communicating that, hey, we're in this as a partnership and we're collaborating and I'm willing to listen to you. Why? Because I care about you. All right, use age-appropriate language. This is probably a pretty self-explanatory idea. Sometimes when we talk to our children, when we discipline them, we tend to forget that they're just children, right? Especially the younger ones. I've heard parents give long, long lectures, the nagging and asking them questions that the kid just looks at them and go, I don't know, like blank stares. Why? Because some of the questions are unanswerable. And the parents forget that this is only an 8-year-old. This is a 10-year-old. This is a 5-year-old. So your kid may not even know what you're talking about at times, right? So try to use simple, concise language with especially younger children, or even with older children, middle school, even middle school children, teenager, if you have a lot to say, try to bring out the gist of what you want to say. Keep them brief, keep them concise, straight to the point. Kids don't like to be nagged. Nobody likes to be nagged, but kids more so. The moment you start nagging and repeating and repeating and regurgitating the same point, they're going to start losing track. Even if they're just sitting there looking at you, they're not listening, right? So age appropriate language, keep it short and precise, get to the point. Talk less, listen more. I'm not going to rehash in this point. You all know this. Now, other don'ts when communicating, what to avoid: empty threats. What is an empty threat? So an empty threat, okay, it usually begins with an if, it's then followed by a then, like, if you hit your brother again, you will have no TV time for the whole week, right? Threats are a form of punishment, even if you don't intend to follow through, but they're still a punishment because, you're introducing something negative, something unwanted in order to take away a behavior. That's the definition of a punishment. You don't have to lay hands on them. You don't have to spank them. And of course you shouldn't. But when you threaten, something would happen if you don't do this or that, or if you continue to do this or that, then that would happen. That's a form of threat. Why is it empty? Because a lot of times, parents don't always follow through what they say they would do. I'm certainly guilty of that as well. So I think a lot of people have done that without even knowing that's a threat. But in this case, empty threats just don't work. Maybe it's going to work for the first 1 or 2 times, especially if your child is younger, on the younger side. One of the reasons why it doesn't really work, long term for sure, is that first, parents might not even remember or have no real intention in following through, right? Is this parent really not going to give TV time for the whole week? Are they going to remember every single day, 7 days, no TV time? You know what? Rest assured, little Johnny is going to count. Oh, well, this is only day 3 and mommy forgot that she said no TV. Oh, this is day 4. I got my TV back. No big deal, right? So what are you teaching them? If you keep using this repeatedly, the child will realize that the threat is empty, and the child will learn that, well, the parent's going to eventually back down, or the parent's not going to remember. What are they learning? Nothing really. And over time, really, it becomes increasingly difficult to come up with more threats. What else can you threaten them with, right? And when we overuse threats, we lose our power and authority, and they're going to just stop listening altogether. The other thing is not to dismiss or deny feelings. I've kind of talked about that when we go through the importance of acknowledging emotions. We also don't want to turn every discussion into a teaching moment. Now, this is particularly relevant when the kids are emotionally overwhelmed and dysregulated. Now, remember the time when, let's say, you're in the middle of an argument with your spouse, let's say, right? Even if your spouse is right, nothing they say would make sense to you in the moment. Why? Because your mind is completely taken over by your own emotions. We call it an emotion hijack, because your emotions are literally, no, your brain is literally hijacked by the emotions. So you can't think straight. Same goes for your child. So some parents will ask then, what do we do in the middle of a meltdown? This might take another workshop to discuss, but one thing you may want to understand is whether your child is throwing a temper tantrum, or is this having like more of a serious meltdown, right? Tantrums are pretty common in young kids when they don't have the right language to express. So going back to the communication of emotions, that is one way to try. Give them the language to express. When they misbehave, quote unquote misbehave, yell, scream, stomp, that's their way of telling you something. There's a message that they're sending. Meltdown's a little bit more serious, tossing and turning in the grocery store, throwing things across the room, screaming, inconsolable, crying. That's a kind of reaction that is a little bit more extreme, and it shows that the kid is overwhelmed, right? So it's usually not something that the kid can control. It happens when our brains are overstimulated and totally overwhelmed by trying to process everything that's happening around us. So what we want to do as parents is we want to understand the signal that the child is sending us, right? Don't assume what we know it might be. Don't assume that it's intentional. It must be manipulated. We want to understand that the child is trying to tell us something. And in fact, this goes in line with what the new brain science is telling us, right? We want to understand the reason why the kid is acting this way. We all have a natural need to feel safe, emotionally safe. So when a kid is having a meltdown, it's usually a sign that they're feeling emotionally unsafe. There is a threat. They don't know what the threat is, but they know something is off and something is wrong. And in those moments in particular, that would be for you to step in and say, okay, honey, you're safe. It's okay. I know you don't want to do this. And again, when you're being empathic, it does not mean that you're backing up, you're giving in. All you're trying to do is to reassure your child that they're in good hands, you're listening, you're right here. Once their emotions come down and the intensity comes back down, their autonomic nervous system gets soothed again, then you can do the real work of teaching or lecturing or explaining to them what are the right things to do, what are the right actions to take. All right. But always connect with their emotions first. I'll give them the sense of emotional safety before you want to start telling them, hey, this is wrong, this is right. Having unrealistic expectations, self-explanatory, know your child's limits, know their strengths and weaknesses. Just because other children can do it, the next door neighbor's kids can do it, it doesn't mean that your child is supposed to be able to do the same thing, right? So knowing your child's, strengths, weaknesses, what can they do, what might not they be able to do, and have realistic expectations is going to make the relationship a lot easier to manage. All right, because of time, just a couple of final take homes. One thing that I've taken away from my 15 plus years of work in working with children and families is when you're curious about children, when you're curious about their world, their intentions, ideas, feelings, it's so much easier to connect with them, for them to listen to you. Because when you're really curious, what you're telling them is you're valuable, you're precious, you're loved. I care to know what you're trying to tell me. Hey, mommy, look, I built this. Look, look, look. And that you might be cooking, you might be busy, a long day of work, come home, you're like, oh my gosh. No, maintain the curiosity and say, okay, let me try to be curious to find out what my kid is trying to tell me. Wow, this looks pretty cute. How did you do that? Wait, do I know how they built the Lego tower? I don't know. Let me be curious. Let me find out. How's your day going? Turn that into a true sense of authentic curiosity. Kids know it right away if you are truly invested and interested in how their day goes versus, hey, how's your day go? How did your day go? How's it going? How's recess? How was lunch? Did you play with so-and-so, right? Those are kind of like just the mundane things that we say. If you go in with curiosity, you go, wait, did you play with so-and-so today? Because I just ran into her mom and they said you guys came up with a game on the other day at the playground. And then they go, wait, what? Really? Oh, they told you that? Wait, what else did they say? Right? So you're trying to be curious. If you don't know, just ask. Emotional safety, I've kind of briefly talked about that, especially in the context of meltdown. Lots of humility. It's okay to make mistakes. You got to own it. Acknowledge that you did something wrong. You said something wrong. If you yelled the other day when you're not supposed to, just go up to them and say, look, Johnny, I shouldn't have yelled. I was too loud. I'm sorry for yelling. That's it. No ifs, ands, or buts. You're not going to try to explain why but look, it was a long day, you didn't do your homework, and you were just fighting with your brother. No, none of that. All right. You just go in and acknowledge, I did something wrong. I yelled. You don't want your child to yell, but you yell. What are you going to do? You're going to apologize, right? And it takes a ton of humility to be able to go to that place and own that you made a mistake, right? You're modeling positive behaviors. You want them to be who they are. You got to show it to them and accept imperfection. Our kids aren't robots. They're not, they're not our yes, we give birth to them, right? But we don't own them. We don't control them. So if there are things that they're not good at, they're not good at. Our job is to foster, nurture, build them up. And if they're imperfect, just like you and I, we're imperfect, right? With a lot of the things we do, accept that, embrace that. And that's a part of them that comes together with the whole package, right? Highlight their strengths, accept their weaknesses, and then foster that relationship. And the final take home I would love for you guys to have, even if you don't remember anything we've talked about today, is relationship always comes first. Connect at the relational level. Everything else will come much, much easily. All right. So because of time, right on time. So I'm gonna just stop here. If anyone has any question, you could feel free to ask or type in the chat box. Or you could private message if you want, or you can email us. If we have a long list of questions that we've accumulated, we're going to put it together in the form of maybe a PDF or something, and then we could, disseminate it to all the parents. Because I did mention that this is being recorded, so I think that might have deterred some parents from asking too many, personal related questions, and that's okay too. All right, so we're going to wrap up here, and we will see some of you again maybe in our next workshop, and that's more specific to ADHD. This is more of a general topic on working with parents and children and communication, and we've got some suggestions, and I've got a couple of emails about future topics, and yeah, we may entertain some of those ideas and certainly keep you guys posted. If there are any other interested, topics that you guys are interested in learning more about, send it our way. We put together something. All right. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you for coming.